Hello and welcome. You're watching the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Peter Ndoro and this is SA Today. A pair of young activists took centre stage during a protest calling for climate action in Madrid, Spain last night. The climate kids from Germany joined thousands of environmental and human rights activists who took to the streets demanding decisive action against climate change. The demonstration took place on the sidelines of the 25th United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP25. Noma Bolani is there and has been covering the story for us.
This was one of many protests that took place in Madrid on Friday night. Activists from across the globe demanding world leaders implement concrete actions to mitigate and adapt to climate change.
Everyone is concerned about this climate crisis, and why shouldn't we be here? It's everyone's lives.
We're Brazilians and we have a president that is destroying our nature, that it's like the lung of the planet.
This discussion here focused on the developing countries in the south, like Nigeria, where there are communities who do not have an opportunity to be here.
The march was brought to a standstill when a pair of young activists made a daring move. Inspired by youth activist Greta Thunberg, 11-year-old Kiwi and 8-year-old Zozo used their bodies to send the message that they're concerned with the lack of action by governments towards climate change.
In 8 years, the CO2 budget for 1.5 degrees will be used up. In just 8 years, what we need is massive action to stop the climate crisis.
The generation that was most affected by climate change is bravely making their mark in the fight for mitigation and adaptation. Their message loud and clear, but will the world leaders gathered here at COP25 listen? Noma Bolani, SABC News, Madrid, Spain.
All right, so that was Madrid in Spain last night. Well, for an update now, let's cross to our reporter in that story, Noma Bolani. Noma, thanks very much indeed for joining us. So today is Saturday, and I just wonder what kind of a day has it been at COP25, given the activity that's been taking place last night and the days before?
Yes, there's been a lot of activity here in Madrid. Last night you saw the pictures of the march that was happening. Actually, there were numerous marches across the city. There was Greta Thunberg. We know she's a youth activist leading a march in Madrid, speaking about she wants action. She's been calling for action most of the year. We saw her in September at the United Nations saying, "How dare you," to the world leaders for not implementing, the implementation phase of the Paris Agreement. Here today at COP25, negotiations are continuing. We had a press briefing from the African group of negotiators a bit earlier this morning, saying they want special circumstances in terms of the usage of fossil fuel. They're saying basically that, Africa is not the biggest carbon emissions emitter. So what they want is that they want some sort of an allowance to kind of balance off economic development as well as sustainability. But I'm joined here today by the Executive Director of Climate Action Network International, Tasneem Essob. She was one of the people who delivered yesterday a memorandum calling for world leaders to actually put the action in terms of fighting climate change. Tasneem, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yes, let us know what exactly is your call as Climate Action Network?
Essentially, we're calling for increased ambition across the board. So the countries have to increase the levels of commitments that they are making to reduce emissions across the world. Countries have to increase their levels of ambition, especially the developed countries, in terms of financial support. And we have to increase our levels of ambition to deal with impacts of climate change. And of course, Africa, South Africa in particular, we are already experiencing very dangerous levels of climate impacts. The drought in South Africa, the extreme weather event in KZN recently with the tornadoes, etc. This is having impacts on ordinary people's lives. There's loss of lives, loss of livelihoods, etc. So what we need now is for the overall levels of ambition by countries across the world, including large parts of Africa where there are high emitting countries. Africa is not just one, it's a continent, and it is made up of high emitters like South Africa, Nigeria and the Maghreb, oil producing nations. You know, we have to look at special circumstances in terms of climate impacts and support for that. But for economic development, we have an opportunity to leapfrog. We don't need our development paths dependent on dirty fossil fuels. We have the opportunity with technology, it's becoming far more affordable, to be saying to the developed world, we want to leapfrog. Help us and support us in getting to renewable energy as the dominant energy source in our countries. So the idea that economic development is tied up with fossil fuels is something that has already been dismissed. There's enough evidence to show that you can have growth by going through a different path and looking at job creation through greener, cleaner opportunities. So I don't buy this entire thing that economic development is tied to fossil fuels. We have to be honest with each other, because the impacts are being felt by those who are the poorest. And if we are concerned about development, about dealing with poverty and inequality, then our duty is to in fact address climate change.
Yes, Tasneem, speaking about pressures that the developed world must be put on, what can they do in order to finance maybe or support Africa in terms of moving to renewable energies and fighting climate change in terms of adaptation as well as mitigation?
Yes, well, so I think that the developed countries have the opportunity to provide financial support, but they have the opportunity to also assist with technology sharing. You know, one of the big things that we would need, for example, is good advanced battery systems for storage. But South Africa can do that itself. Now we have very strong R&D capacity. So yes, the developed world can and should help, but we can also do this on our own, and we should be doing this as well on our own. In terms of adaptation and impacts, I think the big issue at this COP is about loss and damage. And I know that right now the G77 plus China has submitted text on loss and damage that includes the issue of finance for loss and damage. That's the big ask. As Climate Action Network, we want finance for loss and damage. So that we hope that the developed countries will agree to this.
Yes, that was Tasneem Essop from Climate Action Network speaking about what she wants and what they're demanding world leaders to do here at COP25. Back to you in studio.
And Noma, thanks very much indeed. We'll leave that there for the time being, but no doubt we'll be talking to you quite a lot over this COP25, which is taking place in Madrid, the capital city of Spain.